subscribe to the Books on Toast channel, or else the next red traffic light that you find yourself at will never ever turn green.
Hello, this is First Page and I'm Sharin. And for those of you who have been following Books on Toast previously, you would know that from time to time we like to interview authors whose debut works we love a lot. And my this year's favorite debut author that I discovered sometime in I think June is Madhuri Vijay, who is on the couch with us today. So we have a couch today. In a different location. We basically have taken over Noya's living room and kicked her out of the house and put Madhuri here, and now this is the new Books on Toast channel. Okay, so Madhuri, I can't tell you how much I love your book enough.
Thank you so much.
It's the oddest thing. I actually discovered the audiobook first on an audiobook app called Storytel, which if you guys follow us, you know that we have talked about a lot. And from the first line, I'm 30 years old and it is nothing, I was hooked. And I had to stop what I was doing. And of course, later I picked up the book and I read it and I reread it. And anybody who's ever asked me this year what they should be reading, I have mentioned that this is the book that they should be reading.
Thank you.
So thank you for writing it. It's exceptional.
Thank you for reading it.
And yes, I'm done.
Again, and listening to it. And reading it again.
Yeah, I know. Listening was quite interesting. So
she's good. She's a good, the audiobook narrator is good, right?
Yeah. Sneha Mathan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. I haven't heard the whole thing. I'm too scared to hear the whole thing. So.
Yeah, because you hear it in Shalini's voice, which is the protagonist, right?
Yes.
So you feel like, oh man, what is she doing?
I also would hear it and listen to certain sentences and cringe that I made her say those horrible those sentences.
Really?
Yeah, I'm sure there are things that I'd want to change, and I would. Anyway, I can't listen to it. I can't read it either. But I'm glad you did.
So welcome to the channel, Madhuri.
Thank you. Thanks for having
for those
me.
of our audiences who haven't read the book yet, could you please tell our audience what the book is about?
Sure. The Far Field is a novel about a young woman named Shalini who is from Bangalore but travels to Kashmir in search of a man that she used to know when she was a child. And this man had a strange relationship with Shalini's mother. And when Shalini makes this journey, her mother has died recently, and so she makes it out of a sense of grief and dislocation. And she doesn't quite know what she wants to find by finding him. But of course, because she's going to Kashmir, what she finds is a lot more complicated and difficult to come to terms with than she expected, and what begins as a very personal journey quickly evolves into something far more complex and political.
That's not a lot, but she not talked a lot about the book. I will actually talk a lot more about the book, but it's pretty much the journey of a single girl who I think finds herself while finding out who or what other people are as well. So
yes.
that's quite fascinating. I'm going to ask you a very cliche question because I want to get that out of the way before we get to know you a little better. And that is, where did the idea of the far field come from? I remember listening to an audio interview in which you said that an earlier iteration of this was about a mother and a daughter and their difficult relationship. Just talk to us about that.
So the book started in 2010 as a story.
Yeah.
And it was about a mother, a daughter, and a Kashmiri salesman. And its defining quality, that story, was that it was extremely bad. And it will never be shown to another living human being. But when I went back to thinking about writing a novel, I started thinking about those characters, but not before I took many wrong turns and hit a lot of dead ends and all of that. For a while, I was writing an entirely different novel about Kashmir. And that failed for a whole number of reasons. But then, at the end of it, I decided, I know. These were dark days, very dark days. At the end of it, I came back to these three characters. The mother, the daughter, and this man. And I started with Shalini's adult voice, that I'm 30 years old, and that is nothing. And all of a sudden, it was like I had a novel.
Wow.
But it took a long time. It took several years to get to that point.
7 years, right?
Up to 6 years after I got to that point, but 3 years before I got to that point.
How long have you been working on this novel?
The novel itself, it took me 3 years to write, and then 2 years was in the editing, and then a year of sort of tinkering with it. So it's been about 6 years since I really sat down and started writing it.
So was Kashmir always the protagonist that was going to be in the story, because your other novel was also going to be about Kashmir?
Yeah, I wanted to include to Kashmir in a way.
Okay.
And I always knew that, but the character, the voice, the entry point, that I didn't have.
So you grew up in Bangalore, like Shalini did.
Yes.
And you went to Kishtwar, like Shalini did.
Yes, but not under the same circumstances. And
I'm glad.
Yes. I've been to Kishtwar twice.
Twice.
Yes.
You were teaching there.
I was teaching there. Yeah.
Okay.
I was teaching at Haji Public School, which is
Sabha Haji School.
Sabha Haji School.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
I spent 4 years, not 4 years in total, but I went back over the course of 4 years. But I spent a long time there.
What were you teaching there?
Everything: English and maths and singing and sports, whatever.
Primary school, essentially.
Yeah, but also because the school kept growing, right?
Okay.
So now, but when I left, they had gotten up to 8th standard, and now they're up to 10th.
And what years were these? Like from what year to what year?
2012 to 2016. I haven't been back since 2016. Yeah.
Of course.
And other things have happened in personal and, political.
So what drew you to Kashmir, essentially? That's really the question. Like why did you go to Kashmir, and what made you want to start a story about Kashmir?
I don't think I don't have a single answer to that. What I started to realize at some point in my adult life, having had a very good education, and as good as can be, having had all the advantages of, any of more than most people have, I realized at some point in my adult life that I didn't know much about Kashmir, and living down in the south. And I can't say why I had this realization or at what point I had it, but I started to think about the very simple fact that I had grown up in the same country as, say, someone my age who was in Kashmir, who had been born and brought up in Kashmir. And I knew nothing about the way they lived. I was not paying attention to the conflict, even when it was at its worst. Nobody around me was talking about it. I didn't even really learn about it in school, and I can't speak for you. I don't know whether, did you grow up?
No, I mean, I grew up in Chandigarh, so
okay.
I've been to Kashmir twice, but as a family holiday, and I was too young and I don't remember anything.
Exactly.
So that's. But you're right. It's that urban contemporary weird gaze that we have, where we are fascinated with the valley, but we are very far removed from its politics.
And you're not thinking about it.
You don't think about it.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is exacerbated down in the south because it's even further away.
Yeah.
So it felt very dissonant to me, this idea that we should be in the same country, theoretically, and not know anything.
Right.
So I wanted to write a novel about this not knowing.
Okay.
And actually, I didn't know at first I wanted to write a novel about the not knowing. At first I was trying all kinds of other things. But then I came back to this idea that this was essentially a novel about being ignorant.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Which is not going to sell it to any of your viewers who wants to read a novel about people who know nothing.
But it's all of us. Like, there is a Shalini in all of us, and you say it out loud, right? Like, that's what really hit home for me. The fact that she seems like a protagonist or a character who is very selfish, but she's meeting people in Kashmir and who have their own issues, but her issues become somewhat bigger for her.
Yes.
And that gap in being able to relate to other people because you don't know context is the larger message that I took back. I'm like, damn.
Right. Oh, good. I'm glad.
Damn.
That's the appropriate reaction. Just
thanks,
so you know.
I can do PR, no problem. Okay.
I wanted people to think about that, and not necessarily to draw any conclusions, not necessarily to say, well, write some English answer, but like what I learned from this book was, but just to feel slightly less sure about the world than when they began the book.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Tell me about your life in Kashmir. How long were you there? What were the people like? What were the rituals like?
The people were wonderful. I was there for over the course of 4 years, and a lot of our life was just school.
Right.
So, I would write in the mornings, and then we would just spend the rest of the day teaching. And, it's the school itself is incredible. I'm sure you know a lot about it, and lots of your viewers will know about it. It's really doing something very extraordinary.
Tell our viewers what the Haji Public School is.
Happily. We can talk about this for the rest of the interview, because I would talk about this for days. Haji Public School is in a small village that isn't accessible by road, so you have to either walk there or take a horse or whatever. And it serves a whole bunch of villages that are in the area. And kids are sent by their parents from very, very far away. So you have these 7 or 8-year-old kids who come to live with relatives or friends, or even the whole family will uproot and come because the education is so good.
Right.
And the kids, it's an English-based education, but they also learn Hindi, they learn Urdu, they speak Kashmiri at home, they learn Arabic. They're this incredibly multilingual group of kids. So these are kids who can converse to you about Ambedkar or Michael Jackson or apartheid in South Africa. It's a pretty idyllic education, and she's insisted on keeping up her principles and the integrity of the school and the standards and her philosophy, which is no small feat.
Okay, so 4 years you were in Kashmir teaching at Haji Public School. What were the people like? Did you know, like, for instance, an Abdul Latif or like?
Well, it's never that simple, right? Of course not. And no. So the answer is no. I didn't know any of these people. And those are as much inventions as Shalini is and her mother is, and this is absolutely the truth. It was just, to me, it was my job, and I was doing it, and I really loved doing it. And the novel I was not thinking about it much then.
Okay, so it's only once you came back.
It was really much later, and
with the idea marinated in your head.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So do you have friends in Kashmir whom you have been in touch with?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, Sabha and everybody at the school, and also a lot of the ex-volunteers who are scattered around the country.
Okay.
People like that, and I try to keep in touch, but I haven't been able to go back in a while.
Of course.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you know the question I'm going to ask. Does it impact you then? What is happening in Kashmir now?
Of course, it impacts me, and it should impact all of us. It seems wrong and strange that I shouldn't be able to send an email to one of my students and have him say whether or not he's studying okay for his exams. No, I can't even do that. So yes, it is not it's not an ideal situation.
It isn't for sure. Okay, on to some more lighter things like writing.
Okay.
So tell me about your journey with writing. How did you begin writing? Did you do other things before attempting to write this novel or the other short story that you had written, which you can't show anybody?
Right, I can't show anyone. It's under an NDA.
Under an NDA.
Even that. No, I for a long time, I think I always wanted to write.
Okay.
But I don't know how it is, at least when I was growing up, it didn't seem like a legitimate thing to want, right? And I also had this idea in my head that if I had to write, I had to suffer, like in the way that you read about, the sort of quintessential artist living in an unheated room and with only one packet of biscuits and one table, and so I thought that I had to do that in order to qualify for writing. So I did write, but I just wrote for myself, and I would write little stories. In fact, I would just copy stories that I had heard, like Greek myths or Roman myths. I would just write them myself. I would put in different characters, and I would make up the dialogue. And but I had the story already, so it was complete cheating, but it was good practice.
Right.
And then I didn't carry that on. When I went to college, I majored in English because I love to read, and then I majored in psychology because I thought I was going to be a researcher. And that's what I intended to do. I wanted to be an academic. I wanted to, and in some ways, it's not like my interests were any different, because my interests were always people and how they behave, and that's what I wanted to study about as a psychologist. So I applied to grad school in psychology, and then I got into grad school for psychology. And just before I was due to go, a professor of mine told me to apply for this fellowship. It's a very odd fellowship where they give you money to travel around the world doing any project you want, anything. It's really incredible.
What is this fellowship?
It's called the Watson Fellowship.
The Watson Fellowship.
Yes, and it's you have to have gone to certain schools in the States. I went to college in the States, so very small liberal arts schools. If you go, you can apply for this fellowship. Wow. So I applied, and I said I was going to write stories. I was going to write a book of stories.
Okay.
But one of the stipulations of the fellowship was that you can't go back to your own country. And my idea was to come back to India, travel all around India, and write stories.
Which is what we really need also. We don't have contemporary stories.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Mahesh Rao's book, his book of short stories, is in that sort of set in different parts. So when I first heard about that, I was like, he stole my idea. But
damn it, Mahesh.
I know. But I wasn't allowed to. So
where did you go?
I went to different countries that had Indian diaspora populations.
Canada.
No.
Italy.
Trinidad. And Tobago. I went to South Africa, went to Malaysia, went to Tanzania.
Okay. Nice.
I spent some time in Singapore.
Wow.
And nothing came of any of those stories. The only thing that changed over the course of that year was that I wrote to my psychology program and I said, I'm not coming because I don't want to do this. And I reapplied and I went to graduate school for writing instead.
Okay,
so,
that's amazing.
So that was the only thing that came out of all that investment in me by the fellowship.
She went on a travel and she found herself, guys. Is that why you're not on Instagram?
What do you mean?
Are you not on Instagram?
I'm not on Instagram, but it has nothing to do with that.
Okay. But you live in Hawaii now, right?
Yes.
How did you find yourself in Hawaii?
Not by accident.
Okay.
Amazing
accidents in life.
Yes, so many. I started going there because the person I was seeing at the time, who I later married, we went there for a holiday essentially, and we fell in love with it, and both of us can work from wherever we want to, because we're so fortunate in terms of writing.
Right.
That we decided to live there. So now we live there, and I teach at a smaller school over there.
So the reason I ask is this, you had written this interesting article for Elle magazine, where you mentioned that you wrote The Far Field while you were in Hawaii. That's where the story really, you sat down and put it out.
I did a lot of the editing there, yes.
A lot of the editing there. So, and you also drew these interesting parallels between Hawaii and Kashmir, saying that, it is a beautiful tragedy, and, as voyeurs of stories, as we are, we look at all these beautiful places with that sort of, again, like that tourist gaze, oh my God, so beautiful but so sad.
Yes, exactly.
So that's interesting. So and you've already mentioned it, that part of the reason for writing the book was also to explain to people how this reality that we live in, about not knowing everything is fine, that you should at least try to get out of your comfort zone and to get to know what the reality of a situation is. Is that something that is essential to you also as a person, to try and bring realities of different things to people? And was that something also that you amassed while you were traveling to all the different locations where you found Indian diasporas? Are there things that are stitching Indians together in places like these? What is the reason why you write? and tell stories?
Goodness. The question got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
It is psychology.
I don't know why I write. Let's get that out of the way.
We don't know why
I write. I don't think anyone does. I write because I can't not write. It's like an itch. It's an urge to write.
Okay.
I make sense of the world when I write. I'm most at ease in the world when I'm writing.
Okay.
And the world makes sense to me the most when I'm writing, or at least when I have the option of attacking it with words so that I can make it resemble something coherent. As far as indeed you traveling that 1 year, that had a huge impact on me, not only because I decided I wanted to write, but also because I began to travel differently, because I was traveling for the first time, not just to see a place or to enjoy it, but I was trying to see to the heart of it, because I was going to these places, and often I lived with families, and I think a lot of this book came out of that year because I spent so much time in other people's homes. That feeling of not being in your own home and being a guest in someone's home and all of that, I think that feeling was it began that year. So my job wasn't to simply just go there and have a good time. I was trying to understand the people I was around. And so I think it forever changed the way that I traveled. And even now, when I travel, I try to, with varying degrees of success, but I try to know about the place. And I don't mean just I know the facts, I know the tourists, spots, I know the history of this one building, but to feel the atmosphere of a place, to feel the sort of logic by which it runs. And all of this is easier said than done, obviously, but I think it's important to pay attention, right? And not to, close your eyes between your hotel and your restaurant. Like everything else in between that is also travel. And in fact, it probably is the more important part of travel. So that changed the way I moved through the world. As far as what binds Indians together, it was interesting. There was this, I always found, again, I don't want to generalize, but I found, both this longing for this place that they had been removed from in certain cases or chosen to leave in certain other cases, and also the sense that we're better off here, where we are. So it was a very strange push and pull, which was very interesting to me. Yeah. So but I met some really wonderful people over the course of that year.
That's
and I wrote some very bad stories.
Yep.
Also, which will never see the light of day.
We should raid your hard drive. Be like, what is this?
Maybe that's what all the helicopters are.
We are sitting in a place which is Anaya's house, and there are a lot of choppers outside our building. I don't know why, but yeah.
Sorry, I forgot you can't hear them.
Yeah.
We'll cut them out.
Okay. I also in that article you'd also mentioned that Pearl Harbor and Yaha should be in a box set, which I found really funny. So did you grow up watching a lot of movies? Did you grow up?
No, I didn't.
You grew up reading?
I grew up reading.
What did you read? Tell us.
I read all the usual suspects, Enid Blyton.
Faraway Tree?
Yes, that very much so. Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, all of the stuff. Okay. But I also, my parents had a very eclectic collection of books.
Okay.
So I would just pick up whatever I wanted and read it, and often it was completely inappropriate for me, but they didn't care. They didn't care what I read, so I would just read. I read a biography of Marilyn Monroe, which was very sort of seedy, and it was one of those. I don't know. I don't know why it was there in my parents' house. What this says about my parents, but it was there, and I read it.
That they like watching movies.
That exactly. That's the correct answer. So I read far more than I watched movies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us, give us some recommendations of books that you have possibly read, which meant a lot to you and that you keep going back to.
Yeah. There was this one Enid Blyton book, which she didn't even, wasn't an original book, but it was called Tales from Long Ago.
Okay.
And she retold these Greek or Roman myths. Now I can't keep them straight. And also some stories from 1001 Nights, from Arabian Nights.
Okay.
So she had done a sort of simplified retelling. But you know those myths. They're disturbing and dark, and they're really strangely inappropriate for children. But she had written about them. So there was the story of let's see. There was the story of Daphne and Apollo. I think this is Daphne. Anyway, it's basically a young woman who is seen by one of the gods, and he desires her, and she starts running away, and then and he keeps chasing after her, and she asks her father for help, and her father's a different god, and he turns her into a tree.
Okay.
And the story ends there.
Huh?
The story ends there. She's turned into a laurel tree, and so that's where the laurel wreaths come from. That they put around. And I read that, and I was shocked. I mean, I still remember that feeling of this is it. This is the strangest justice I've seen. She was turned into a tree because and nothing happened to him, and so I remember that book it really unsettled me, and I began to think of, I don't know, I can't say it was then, but I began to think of art as not necessarily something that has to be moral, not necessarily something that has to be beautiful or cute, or even not necessarily something that has to be comforting, but it can be something that's dark and strange and even sometimes wrong, perverse. And that was a valuable lesson to learn, because most kids' books are anodyne and they tell you exactly what we want our children to learn. And I'm glad that I had this book. I'm glad that I learned that lesson, that the world was not pretty, and that it didn't have to be pretty in anything I wrote, which I clearly took that lesson to heart.
Yes, the Farfield is not pretty.
It's not pretty.
Okay. What about some of the recent books that you might have read in the last 2 to 3 years that have meant a lot to you, that you recommend to people? Like, I recommend this book to everybody.
Thank you. I read, let's see, Elena Ferrante's books. I really like the Neapolitan series. Then there was a book I read by an American writer called Garth Greenwell called What Belongs to You.
Okay.
And it's very, very powerful. Set in Bulgaria, about a young American teacher who has a sort of strange contractual sexual relationship with he's not quite a prostitute, but and it's very finely observed and finely written. I thought it was beautiful.
Another question I had about the book, especially Shalini's journey. She comes across as a person or as a character who again is sort of, as readers, and you also mentioned this, that not all books need to have like a moral lesson. That there is certain amount of perverse nature, and I think all of us, that sort of also connects to literature that tends to challenge our dark sides much more than our bright sides. Over the past few years, when it comes to female representation in books, especially with authors like Mary Beard or even Madeline Miller, what they're doing is they're re-examining a lot of the Greek myths from the female perspective and trying to give us their point of view ahead. Do you think that for a lot of young Indians, maybe who are living in small towns, whose learnings may not be as sort of wide as maybe people who live in urban cities, for them, is it essential to read a book like The Far Field to really know like a woman's potential in order to reach a certain place? Because Shalini could have been a man as well.
Yes,
but she's a woman,
and she does things that men would do.
Yeah, yes. Correct. So was that intentional to create like a female character, or is that something that just happened organically?
There was no way she was going to be female from the start.
Of course.
But I always knew that she would do things and act in ways that we traditionally associate with men.
Yeah.
And that was intentional.
Yeah.
The notion of the lone traveler, the lone wanderer who sort of blows through a landscape, leaving behind, broken hearts and destruction, and sort of vanishes off into the sunset, and nobody knows where he comes from, nobody knows where he goes. I wanted her to be somewhat that kind of character. And the interesting thing is that I think if she had been a man, she would have been people would have been far more likely to have forgiven her. Because that's just what those male characters are like, right? Correct. They're wounded and broken inside, and so it's all understandable what they do. But the minute you have a woman who's behaving like that, then people's hackles go up. They expect women to act differently, and they punish them more harshly when they don't. So that was very much intentional. Okay. Yeah, but I wasn't consciously thinking of, well, if I write this, then there will be, 61% of female. Yeah, it wasn't a statistical choice. It was, she was the only person I wanted to write about. And who knows, maybe, in the next book or the one after that, I will want to write a male character for all kinds of reasons. Okay. Those things should be beyond the logic of statistics. I think publishing has a responsibility in terms of representation. Writers don't.
Fair. Speaking of, are you working on new books?
Yes, book. Tell us one at a time. I'm monogamous when it comes to my books.
Okay.
One. I can't tell you about it.
Okay, you can't tell us.
I'm not superstitious. It's just that I know that if I tell you about it, it will sound so silly that I will not be able to go home and work on it again.
Is it about flowers? No. Never.
What do you have against flowers?
Nothing at all. They're beautiful. Okay, all right. In terms of congrats on the JCB Prize for Literature shortlist. As a debut author, do these literary prizes mean something to you guys? Like, does it help your author journey in terms of more promotions or more visibility? Like, how does a literary honor help?
I'm very new to I've only gotten one, so I can only tell you what this one feels like.
Okay.
The best part has been, and I'm not saying this because we're sitting across from it, but meeting people like you, and I would not have, I would not have had the opportunity to do this.
Right, yeah.
If it weren't for that. And I would not have had the opportunity to meet many of the other people I have met because of this. And it opens doors that otherwise remain shut. Which, of course, begs the question, is that fair? Then what? Because you might write a very, very good book that doesn't, for whatever reason, get those doors open because it just doesn't make it onto the list.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to remember that as wonderful as it all is, it's separate from the work, and that if I hadn't been on the short list, I could have gotten angry and said, "Oh, these, it's arbitrary," and I would have been right in some certain sense. But that the same principle holds now. It is arbitrary, right? That to a certain degree, it is arbitrary. So I'm try to keep that in perspective. But
to get the bigger picture.
It's been good, and it's been an honor to have met all the people that I've met.
Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, I think we're going to now play a game.
Oh, sure, okay.
Which is called Pitch Please. What essentially I'm going to do is give you two made-up titles of books, and you have to pitch it.
Okay.
To an agent or a publisher, whoever. Okay. So do your best.
Okay.
Okay, ready?
All right.
Okay, to start with pitch, please. Okay. Very simple. This has been prompted by Anuya, who's my partner in crime, and she insisted I put this in. It is not me, it is her, okay? The Garfield.
This is about this is a novel about a one-legged man who lives behind a bar called the Garfield, and every evening waits in front of the bar for a figure from his childhood who may or may not be human, and it is also a commentary on late-stage capitalism.
What? Published this already? That's amazing. Did you just pull that out of a hat, out of nowhere? It's amazing. Wow. I'm going to give you two more. Just because you're so good at this.
Late-stage capitalism was the only thing I had in my hat.
Love in the Time of Diarrhea.
This is a comic romp through the gullies of Shivaji Nagar in Bangalore, looking for a bathroom after an unfortunate visit to which restaurant don't I mind throwing under the bus? Let's say a bar called the Garfield. And it is also a commentary on late-stage capitalism.
One more and then you're off the hook. Only because you live in Hawaii. I smell what the rock is cooking.
This slim novel, told from the perspective of two childhood friends, is about their mutual desire for a muscular actor with a singularly shiny head, but it is also a tender exploration of female friendship and the challenges posed by the unrealistic demands of society on women's appearances.
And
late-stage capitalism.
You're very good at blurbs. You are right. She's right. She's amazing at blurbs. Alternative career option.
Now we just have to go back and write the thing.
Exactly. You can write a dedication to us when you do write these books.
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you so much, Madhuri, for joining us for this really, really insightful discussion.
Thank you.
You guys, please watch this video, like, share, subscribe, and please tell everybody to buy The Far Field because it is not very far. It's very nice. Very nice. Thanks.
Thank you.